Hello, welcome to another episode, another webinar for the Carbon Removal Challenge 2023. We're very lucky to be joined today by Karen Sheffield, who is the founder and managing partner of, I'm going to say Pachama? Pachamama?
Pachamama.
Pachamama. Ventures. That is a very fun word to say. Is that how you decided? Pachamama Ventures. Say that one time fast and it'll make you smile. Pachamama Ventures. An early stage US venture capital firm investing in climate tech startups. She has decades of experience as an operator and financier executive for Fortune 100 companies. Karen, thank you so much for joining us. I think it's really important for the participants in the challenge to sort of understand how do you go about taking an idea from the point of being a prototype to getting funding for it to actually turn into something bigger? How do you talk to people? How do you sort of connect with people who can help get it to the next level? So we're really excited to have you here, sort of sharing your wisdom with the audience. So this is also being recorded. So hopefully if you're watching the video at home, this is also going to be a value to you later as well. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to you, Karen, and then we'll have some time for some Q&A at the end. Thanks so much.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Matt and Grant. I really I'm in awe of what you're creating here, and welcome to all the students participating in this year's Carbon Removal Challenge by Open Air Collective. So I will jump in straight into the about me really quick to get out of the way. As Matt mentioned and introduced me briefly, I am the founder and managing partner of Pachamama Ventures. So Pachamama, for anyone wondering, is a Quechua word, which is the ancient language of the Incas, and it means Mother Earth. So I decided to name my firm accordingly, since I'm from Peru originally myself, and then I also wanted it to denote what they fund and the firm investing, which is climate tech solutions to heal the earth. So my background is very varied. I'm an operator turned investor, and particularly with an interest and focus on climate tech. And within climate tech, I focus on three subverticals, which is energy, ag tech, and CCUS, carbon capture, utilization, and storage solutions. So as you can see here on the page, I'm not just going to read it out loud. You can read it through yourself and then go back to the recording to refer. But I've worked for a number of companies, usually Fortune 100 companies, as an operator and a finance executive. And my interest in startups and investing in them started 3 years ago during the pandemic, when I started making angel investments on the side. So we can move away from this, me now, and then go directly into the topic today. So I structure it, I changed it. I know the title is Fundraising, Communication, Networking. I'm starting with communication, moving on to networking, and then fundraising, because there is a natural progression for this all, right? So as Matt was mentioning, you all are really technical, and I can't do a poll live and see the hands raising right now or anything, but if I had to guess, most of you are thinking seriously of developing a carbon removal solution, or really working in the field of your choice, which is very technical, right after college. Many of you might actually decide to create your own companies and start your own businesses based on what you will work off of that. And many of you will pursue a PhD and then do maybe that afterwards. But regardless of what the timing is, you'll find one thing is true, right? Everything from creating a prototype and being able to sell it and really tell your story to people who are not as technically adept as you might find yourself to be is really important, right? So a lot of VC investors, such as myself, that are even in climate tech, don't really fully understand all the intricacies of the technologies behind of what you're building, right? So it's really important to become very concise and really clear in how you communicate your ideas and your products, so that you can really get traction on that. So let's move on with communication first. I'll spend about 25 minutes, half an hour talking, and then I'll shut up. And then I want to hear all your questions, comebacks, and everything that you have. I would love for this to be interactive, so please interrupt me. Feel free to raise questions, and you can put them in the Q&A. We'll get to them. So on communication, I feel like this is a framework that most of you should be familiar with, right? And if you're not, I'm happy to introduce you to it. But I find it really helpful to anchor ourselves on how do you create a messaging? How do you message around your prototype, especially being very technical as you are yourselves? When you're trying to communicate an idea and you're trying to get people to really buy into it or really understand it and really, get them to see your point of view, or be on the same page as you, right? In other ways. In other words, you want to use these three framework from Aristotle, right? The three persuasive appeals is what this framework is called. A message essentially, a message and the audience and everything that entails communication has three components. One is, and this is like the Greek word right around it, ethos, pathos, and logos. So what does ethos mean, which is the first one here? Ethos has to do with ethics, right? Like, so that's where the English word goes into, right? Or derives from in the Greek word ethos, which has to do with your credibility or your character. What does that mean? Why is that important when delivering a message around your prototype or whatever you're working on, particularly in your field of expertise? This means that you have to be seen or establish a credibility and a reputation that makes you instantly the expert, right? And I say instantly in terms of like engaging an audience for the first time, right? But there is some pre-work that goes into that, and we'll go into networking and how you craft that credibility and how you build that reputation around you. But that's the first element, ethos. Really important to establish an ethos before you can effectively communicate your message. Pathos is the number two. And pathos is just a Greek word to denote emotions, right? And the emotional appeal of a message. I know this sounds kind of weird to talk to when it comes to delivering a message that has to do with a scientific approach, or like, communicating in this case, the messaging around a carbon removal solution that you might be working on. But what this has to do is more the connection and relatability, right? Or if you will, the relevance of this message to the audience, right? So when you're delivering a message, you do this all the time, right? Every day in everyday life, you tweak your messaging and your approach depending on who you're talking to. So really important to engage with the audience and really vet them for, is this person gonna are they really well adept to what I'm gonna go into really technical detail? Should I go one level up, more high level? Are they gonna connect with my why? Why am I so interested about this? Like, all of these things. So because audiences ultimately are drawn to relatable issues and people. And then number three and last is logos, right? Which is the Greek word for anything that has to do with logic. So if you think about this, the part of the message, and this will resonate with you all, I think, right? There has to be a logic to the message, presented with facts, presented with a due diligence that has to do with how you prepared all of this, right? In the case of a solution, right? You will be pressed to answer questions about, how do you measure the impact of this carbon removal solution, for example, right? These are questions that I ask, right? When startup founders pitch to me, for example, how do you exactly measure this? Like, show me the math and show me the prototype testing and the results of all of this, right? So that you can be effective ultimately in getting your message across. So this is real. I know that this is very high level, like I said, but this serves as a good framework as to how you should think of communicating this. I'm going to pause this for a second. Matt, do you have any questions before I continue on this, or any comments? I can't see the Q&A because I'm in presenting mode. So
That's okay. I actually do have a question, but I was going to wait till the end to ask it, but I can jump in with it now if you would
yeah,
prefer to
no,
make it a
please
little
do.
bit more interactive.
Yes,
I was just like typing it in
yeah,
when you called on me. I was like, oh, I got called on by the teacher. It's funny, I think communication is so important, and something that I think a lot of people, especially people who are not used to it, maybe earlier in their career, sometimes more technical people struggle a little bit with that aspect of sort of communicating their work and their ideas with people. Some people just sort of struggle with like just talking to people that they don't already have a relationship with, which is why I think having this framework is so helpful. Actually, there's a old Seinfeld joke about this, which is like, they took a poll of people and they found like their number one fear was public speaking,
yeah.
and he was like, number two is death. Number two. That means if you're at a funeral, most people would rather be in the coffin than delivering the eulogy. So I feel like it's really helpful to have like this sort of
By the way,
framework.
I remember that joke because I love
Yeah,
that.
it's a classic. But like, I think it's really important. People often get frustrated when their research is gaining traction, or they're trouble, executing on their vision and ideas, and sometimes brilliant ideas kind of rot on the vine because the people who are behind them have trouble appealing to other people, explaining them to other people. So I guess my question is, ethos, pathos, and logos. I really like breaking it down into sort of three classic domains of how to communicate these ideas. Do you find that people struggle more with one of these than others? And if so, do you have sort of recommendations for how to get through that struggle? And I'm going to turn
Yeah.
my camera off and take my answer off the air.
Yeah, no. That's a great question. And and I like the way you said, because I encountered that, and I encountered that myself even early in my career, even when I'm not a super technical engineer or someone who's working on like solutions or a PhD, but even as a finance person at the beginning of my career, I remember spending hours creating a model that was so good at forecasting, and the forecast accuracy was within 2% for large numbers. This is like multi-billion dollar revenues. And I was so proud of it all, and I wanted to share it and put it on. I remember splattering it all in slides and showing how the math was done and presenting this to a VP, a vice president, and I was at PepsiCo, and my finance director pulled me to the side at the end of the conversation, and he said, "How do you think you did in this presentation?" I was like, well, I did fantastic. I mean, I show her I arrived to the numbers, like I thought that, it was great because I was showing how we got to this forecast accuracy of within the 3%, I felt proud. I was like, good. But did you see the face of confusion in the VP face? Like they were like, why are we talking about how the meat was ground for so long? Right. And so then I was, okay, what does that mean? It's like, it means that they don't need to know that level of detail. Like maybe that's okay for like a finance manager or director. Read your audience, in other words, he said. Like, I'm a director and now you're talking to the vice president. They don't really need to know how all the meat was ground because you already build that credibility. You're here, right? That's a proof of that. And you've been doing good work. So you already have that credibility. He was talking about ethos. So now it was less about the logos part on like how you build to the details. It was more about the message. What's the takeaway here? Because these people are really limited in their time. And I know that sounds frustrating. And I remember being like, but I want to show my work because I'm proud of it. And I feel like a lot of the technical founders that I encounter, PhDs, and people that are really brilliant, technical, they're so proud of all the work that they've done and they want to showcase it. And then sometimes finding it demoralizing when someone says, well, you know what, I'm going to have to pass. Because the other person is not understanding it, not because you're less fantastic. You're fantastic, right? But it's just about how to message. So I think I think the pathos is actually the middle one, is what the one to very long way to answer your question. But I think that's what most people, including myself, struggle with, right? How to appeal to that audience. Read the room.
Yeah, totally agree. Thank you.
I'm gonna move on then. This is just two statements, and you tell me which one. If you had to guess, I'm gonna keep using Matt as my interaction guinea pig here, like the voice of the people here. Which one seems more clear to you? I'll read them both, right? I have experience managing P&Ls and designing accretive solutions for large cap companies. And then the second one, I am a seasoned finance executive adept at helping companies scale revenues and grow profitability. Which one sounds more clear? Number two.
I'm gonna take door number 2.
Yeah. And they both say the same, essentially the same, right? I think when we are, again, going back to the point of pride and showing your work, we are all, or not all, but like, I like to think that a lot of us are like really studious, and we try to, make good grades and like really dedicate ourselves and apply ourselves. I think that we have that inclination to use this jargon that is complicated and it's like a secret language or a secret handshake. And all of that has to go away when you are trying to appeal to a broader audience or people that are outside of your field, and where you're working on an interdisciplinary team, and you will, right? Maybe right now it doesn't feel like that because you're in the middle of it all, but eventually you will start working with people and other teams, people who are different than you, have different background. They have studied different things, but you're all rallying around the same cause. And climate is actually a lot like that, right? The climate community, of all the communities that have been a part of fintech and CPG others, right, is one of the most welcoming and one of the most multidisciplinary communities when you're working, right? So you will not only work with carbon removal scientist for all your life, right? Especially if you want to create your own startup eventually. You'll work with people from different walks, and they don't have the same language, technical language of you. So it's really important, again, that keep hammering on this, is read the audience and adapt your language and your messaging accordingly so that people can understand you in plain English, right? That becomes even more clear when you go into the fundraising part, and I will touch on that. Okay, so let's move on. I want to end this section on communication because I'm looking at the time. I don't want to spend too much more time here in each of these sections, but I just wanted to end with this interesting quote by a painter, no less. But he said, "The ability to simplify means to eliminate the unnecessary so that the necessary may speak." Right? So this is a quote to just summarize what we've been hammering on, which is it's really important to be concise and clear when you're trying to deliver a message, and just use plain English especially if you're gonna start fundraising. And again, I'll go into that section and you'll see what I mean by that. So let's move on to the next section unless someone has questions. Check in because I cannot see the Q&A. Let's
I
move
think
on
we're
to
going to move on to the next section. Thank you.
Okay, fantastic. Let's move on to networking. I know this is something personally at the beginning of my career, I hated what it meant, or like what the connotation of networking, right? It felt forced and unnatural. It felt like I was, kind of selling myself. Like I just had like almost like a reaction, a physical reaction against it. But I think later on in my career, what helped is reframing it, right? You don't have to be, and you can be genuine and yourself and still be an effective connector with people, right? You do that already with the people who you enjoy, whatever hobbies you enjoy to do with, and it just helps to reframe it in a way that it's not just about passing out business cards and a huge party and being forced to talk to everyone. And some people are like that. They walk through the room, and then at the end of the happy hour of the party, they have met somehow every single person in the room. I found that that's not my approach. My approach is I want to make relevant, interesting conversations with maybe 2-3 people in the entire party. If I walk out with 3 people, solid connections, I really struck like an interesting, there were mutual things in common, and I realized that maybe the person was complimenting me in things that I or it's just an interesting conversation, right? Like just seek out interesting people, and I think interesting things will happen in your life. I think that's the bottom line. This graph here is just to showcase, and then I'm borrowing random people's names here. Thomas is actually my husband's name, but I wanted to showcase here that people have different networks or groups of people, right? Each of you will have access to certain people that maybe others in other circles don't, right? Like, and I think the beauty of networking is being able to tap into someone else's network. That's your connector, right? And so they open up this world of connections that you might not have access to any other way, right? So I think that that's the beauty of networking when we see it as like the neural networks that really create this effect of multiplicative effect. So when you reframe it like that and you really stay genuine to yourself and who you are, and you tell the story of yourself, right? Like at events that help you engage others. That's one of the frameworks I like to use. These are some stats. I mean, again, you can refer to this. I can skip this over, but essentially, you all know the importance of networking. 70% of people have in a survey that this is a survey from 2 years ago. I should have like sourced it in the bottom, but this is 2 years old, and so it's fairly recent. 70% of people said that they had gotten to their current job through networking, right? And so what does that mean is we are all people at the end of the day. So you can try to put your head down and work hard and say that that's enough to get ahead in life. But the reality is that everyone from the recruiter, everyone from VCs, we're all human beings at the end of the day. So the bias is unfortunately that you will favor someone you have had a previous relationship with or some kind of a connection with, right? And it's not just about the work, right? So all things equal, if the work is solid, in between these two people, who am I going to favor as a human being? Is someone, hey, I connected with you. I remember you. We had like a great conversation, so it's just very human. There's no two ways about it. So network is extremely important. And I would say particularly specifically and relatable to carbon removal, try to find carbon removal organizations. Open Air Collective it's a perfect example of one I stumbled upon really a few months back. And when I saw what they were doing, I instantly became interested and I wanted to engage, right? And so I just reached out, and you be bold, because you are reaching out to organizations you have a direct interest in engaging with. And there is nothing wrong with it, right? Asking questions and say, hey, how do I get involved? Just be bold and do it, because that that's your passion. And if there is a mutual interest in engaging, then they will respond. And sometimes people don't respond, and that's fine. But just put yourself out there, especially when you are as you want to increase your network and add people to your connections that are working on the same things that you are. This is another code. I'm not going to read it out loud. You can just keep referring to this deck. It's going to be sent out. I believe so, Matt, right? Like the slides are going to be sent out. Otherwise, I can send you a PDF version.
We'll link to them if you have like a Google Slides thing, or I could post it on Google Slides or something like that. But we could post it. The people who are giving us slides are like doing like recording and then slides on the carbon removal challenge page.
Fantastic. Okay. Well, I'm going to move on then to the last topic, which is fundraising, really quick. And then I want to open it up for Q&A and interactions. Fundraising, interestingly enough, I am not a salesperson at all. I've never sold one thing in my life. All of a sudden, last year, I started fundraising for a $10 million fund. And, I think the biggest thing about fundraising is it's just a different word for several things. And here's what I mean by that. Here are 4 synonyms of what I understand fundraising to be. One, it's about storytelling, right? Fundraising is nothing if you don't have a really good story, or selling in general, right? Like that's another synonym for it. You really inherently have to believe that what you have in your hands is something, it's a good product, right? And if the product is yourself, like in the case of a VC, when it's fundraising from limited partners, investors, in this case, the product is me. In your case, if you're developing a prototype for a carbon removal solution, you want to be the number one person who is the number one believer of that solution, right? So otherwise you wouldn't be going to market and trying to fundraise and get investment from investors, right? From VCs. So storytelling means that you just want to make sure that you have a strong and compelling product. Selling, it's the other word, the synonym that I was talking about fundraising. It's interesting because, like I said, I didn't have any sales background. And so I had to do with digging deep and understanding my why, right? What's your why, right? And then it goes back to what we were talking about on communication and going through all that framework and making sure that you have a solid story around it. Spinning is another word and a synonym for fundraising. And what do I mean by that is, when you're fundraising, when you're talking to different people, you'll realize that people have different approaches. When you're talking to investors, you can talk to angel investors, you can talk to venture capitalists. These are just different words for different actors in the ecosystem that have different thresholds or different incentives and motives in mind, right? For what is it that they want to invest in. And by the way, every VC investor out there has a different thesis, right? So really understanding and getting behind this goes again back at like the pathos part, understanding your audience. Really, before you go into a VC, really doing your homework. And does this VC invest in early stage or growth stage, later stage companies? Do they invest in carbon removal at all? Maybe they only invest in energy solutions. Because it's really, it can be very embarrassing to end up going and selling to someone who the thesis is off, right? And you don't even get that response back, because the VC in their mind is thinking, well, you could have just gone to my website and see that I don't invest in this. Like, you're a CPG company, I don't invest in climate tech, whatever the case may be. And spinning has to do with like how you pivot your story and change the approach depending on who you're talking to, right? So that's the pathos part, once again, that keeps playing on it. And scaling, the other, it's another word that I use as synonym for fundraising. which means in my mind, when you talk about fundraising, you gotta talk about like, what's the story? How do you point the people to the future? When you're talking and selling your story and your product and your prototype to people, you gotta be able to point them to the future. How do you plan to grow? What are your plans to, you go from point A to point B to commercial viability in this case, or whenever it comes to growing, like, let me point you to what I think this company is going to be worth, right? Like, so all of those things. And that's what I mean by scaling. So I'll stop there because I think that we are just about on time to open it up to Q&A. I know I threw quite a bit at you and really fairly quickly. So I wanna make room for a couple of questions and then a couple of examples I have of technical founders that I helped with their communication and their pitch.
Yeah, that's great. I would love to see those examples actually. Do you want to start with one of those real quick and then we'll get into questions?
Yeah. So the two examples I'm going to talk about, and I'm not going to reveal the names of the companies just because I just want to leave it high
totally
level.
fair. Yeah.
But the two examples are actually very technical founders. They are some of the most brilliant and most tech-oriented, technically oriented founders I've ever worked with. Both have PhDs, both have like more than decades of experience in their field, right? And one was working or is working on a chemical-based solution for carbon capture. Okay, and the other one works on a cow emission measurement, MRV solution, right? And so both came to me with the pitch was very technical. And when I say that there were diagrams being shown at me for the chemical founder, I was personally proud, and I love to see that and actually dig deep. Like I remember the MRV emissions founders sent me this 80-page document, very technical, but it's not standard. It's not standard to do that. You don't send an 80-page very technical document to a VC for considering an investment. So it's really important to really, first of all, take a step back and explain to the founders that this is not standard, which is not to say you can, color outside of the lines, but it's just too technical, right? Like bottom line is, if you cannot explain to me what your startup idea is or what the problem you're solving is in 2 simple sentences in plain English, you probably already lost me as an investor, right? And just a really simple stat to throw out there for anyone who cares is thinking about getting a startup stood up at some point is, most investors and most people in general don't spend more than half a minute on a slide. So say you have 10, 15 slides, no one is going to spend more than, like 2 minutes on that entire deck. And if you don't really
I think that's actually an important thing. It just started to interrupt for a second, but I think that's something that I didn't even realize until much later in my career, that the decks, I didn't know until I think it was in my 30s what a deck meant in that term. So I remember a friend of mine was working at Boston Consulting Group, BCG, which is one of the biggest consulting companies out there. And him explaining to me that the way that top level executives and VCs and people of that ilk want to have information presented to them was in presentation software that is it's kind of like a series of PDFs. It's like slides, and it's that's not what it was meant for. That's not ever what this software is designed for, but it has become the standard for business communication, that if you want to get an idea across to somebody, you don't give them a paper with lots of walls of text in them basically that they can read. You give them decks. You give them a presentation that's meant for them to read without somebody explaining it to them. And so those of you who are in the audience, if you get to the point where you're trying to raise money, you should be producing decks. You should produce it's a presentation with information and images in it that is readable easily for somebody who without someone presenting it to them. Sorry to interrupt, Karen, but
no.
That's something that I think when you're so steeped in this, it's something that people don't understand when they're first starting out in the business world.
Yeah, I mean, this is a perfect example. I created a simple deck. I didn't put many words around any of these slides, as you can tell. I didn't. I did that on purpose because I wanted to it should, when you are presenting, and also, by the way, you do have a presenting deck, and then you have a sent deck. So I know it gets very confusing, but when you're presenting, it shouldn't be really busy, right? Because it should just work as a guide. You have your talking points and it's kind of guiding you there. It's a guiding document and you are feel free to go off script as needed, right? But if it's a send deck, you're never going to meet essentially the person you would be conveying information to. You should make sure that there is some appendix there, something that you want to go more into detail there.
I know some of you are working on technical projects and they're thinking about having long research papers, but for the judging, we're going to also require you to submit a shorter either deck or like a 10-page like white paper type situation so that reviewers can get an idea of the project without delving through a 60, 100-page technical paper. So
I'm actually curious myself, what are the submission guidelines for this challenge? I'm curious.
yeah, so we're actually going to be sharing those in the next week or two. We're going to have a form that we're going to give them. There's going to be like specifics about like, title of your project, team members, the abstract, I think it's 200 words. I don't have the exact numbers off of my, but we'll have like little breakdowns of each part of it. And then we will have a part where, as you mentioned, there are people, some technical projects have, a 100-page research paper that goes along with it to sort of prove the work. And some of the participants have already contacted me with saying that they have those type of materials. We are going to require more brief information for the judging as part of this challenge because we have, about 30 teams in this competition, and a 100-page paper from each team would be a lot for the judges to go through. So there's going to be an opportunity for people to submit those papers, but we're also going to require them to submit more concise documents, like a 10-pager as part of their submission, so that the judges could review that. And then if they are intrigued, they can read more in that larger research document. But yeah, you have to be able to format and figure out how to put your information in a context that somebody who will be intrigued by that shorter version, and that will be what guides them. And if someone just hits all they have is a 100-page paper, you're probably going to lose them. And to your point before, Karen, about the VC spending, I think you said it was a minute and a half per slide. Was that it?
Half a minute.
Half a minute, right? Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I was like a minute and a half actually sounds like a long time. Yeah, half a minute. Yeah, you need to be able to convey ideas quickly, and I think it is in some ways contrary to how people work that research, they want to and I think we appreciate that they want to very much the truth of what they're saying, not just make claims. But in some contexts, you have to make those claims, and then once someone is intrigued enough by the claims, then you can have a separate place where you justify those claims more deeply.
Actually, that's a really important point you just made, Matt. And I think it bears digging deeper a little bit since we have the time now.
Yeah.
Just the understanding that a first meeting, it doesn't have to be the one meeting where you get it all out of your system, right? Because there is a process on fundraising, especially when you start talking to angel investors and VCs eventually. There is that first meeting, right? That is the first of hopefully many. But that first meeting is about really making the punch point, like really captivating them with a real solution, right? That you can demonstrate, hey, in these 3 steps or, just a few slides, 10 slides, that we have the problem that for this amazing solution that bears really being solved. We have the team to do it. So you essentially in that one deck, you want to convey that you are the team. So the who, you're solving the what, which is really important, and then the when, right? Like all what the timeline is and all that. But you need to be very clearly the team that is tackling that, especially when it comes to early stage technical early stage tech and development. So I think that that's an important point that you made, because then the next meeting is pre-due diligence or live due diligence, when then the investor will say, okay, I like the first meeting, let's keep talking, let's move on to due diligence, which then means, okay, now I'm interested in all the technical aspects and everything. And so there is a time and place for each of these conversations, to your point. So that's good.
Yeah, I definitely feel like there is a reticence for people to communicate their ideas a little bit. And I think some of it is just practice. So I think that's one of the things that we're hoping that we can get some exposure for our teams this year, especially the finalists, is to be able to share their ideas with people and get some of that practice in of being able to talk to people about their work in a way that is comprehensible. And I used to have a lot of problems with public speaking or speaking to people I didn't know, and sometimes that still comes up even with all, but the best way to get through it is to just keep doing it until you get better at it. Almost like
Mm.
uh, I say to my students all the time, I teach games. My day job is I'm a professor at the NYU Game Center. And a lot of those people just want to make great games and not have to like tell people about them, or they want somebody else to just discover how brilliant their work is. And a lot of brilliant games don't get out there if the people who make them aren't able to
Mhm.
talk and communicate with people and sort of spread the word about it. So
Mhm.
yeah, it's truly important. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I think that that's really interesting because I've observed the same, right? My husband is a scientist actually, so he's a PhD actually and applied mathematics, and so we complement each other fairly well. But I do see that um the communication approach, he's definitely gotten better over time. He's like so much more assertive now, and like he really, because he's found a passion, right? Like that he can something he's really proud of, and in his line of work, and he found himself in a way, right? But yeah, it takes everyone time. I even struggle myself. Explained that in my career, right? Communication and whatnot.
I
Hopefully that
definitely
was
think
helpful.
that,
Yeah.
yeah, that was great. And I think, one thing I would say to the audience is that you will get anything you try to do in life, you get better with practice. It seems like there are things that people are just naturally talented at, and there are people who have like quicker proficiencies or pick things up faster. But I've done everything from stand-up comedy to
Oh, really?
programming to just like things that people think like either you're good at this or you're not, either it's in you or not. And I am here to tell you,
Wow.
everybody gets better in time. I've seen people perform in stand-up where I was like, who told you you could do this? What makes you think that you'd be good at this? And then you see that same person, if they stick with it, you see them 6 months later, like, all right, they got better. Like,
Yeah.
it is incredible that everything's just lifting weights. Everything that people do, if repetition and practice will make those muscles bigger, whether those
Yeah.
muscles are your comedic muscles or your programming muscles or
Yeah.
just things that people don't think of as muscles that you can get better by continuing to do it over and over again. I've talked to 2D and 3D artists, the same thing. It's just like it's just practice. You just keep moving your hand, you keep drawing that figure, and the 10th time you draw the figure, you're going to be better than the first time. The 100th time you draw the figure, you're going to be better, and you got to get those reps in for almost everything.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with that. I mean, especially when it comes to keeping on the topic of fundraising. You will hear so many no's. I, as a startup
As someone who
founder,
has done fundraising, thank you to our
I,
sponsors, by the way. We
yeah,
appreciate your support. Those of you who have said yes to sponsoring sessions just like this one, and for providing funding to make this challenge happen. But yeah, we've gotten a lot more no's than yeses to get to this point. You just got to keep asking and keep
yeah,
working until you. This challenge wouldn't happen if we stopped at the first round of no's.
absolutely. And I have to echo that, right? Because I'm fundraising for my own fund as well. You hear so many no's, but you'd be surprised so many of the reasons why people say no, or in the case of institutional investors for me, or LPs or people, they're so varied, and they have nothing to do with you, nothing. People probably are over allocated, right? That happened to me towards the end of last year. They're like, oh, I am over allocated, I don't have any more this year, come back to me next year. I was like, okay. So there are so many reasons, right? It can be that it's just not the criteria of investing, right? They're not looking to invest in this, in my case, climate tech, and they're more into Web3 or whatever the next thing is, right? There's so many reasons that have nothing to do with you, and but you do also want to uh, com- be very clear and listen to feedback that is helpful. Some people will offer critical and good feedback, and they always be open to that, right? If they are giving you another way to pivot the messaging, or if they are thinking, that part wasn't really all that clear in that one slide, maybe, like, just be open to feedback, right? And again, this is all very subjective, right? Like, especially when it comes to slides, it's like everyone will have a different opinion on how it should be presented. So combing through all of that is it's also another challenge.
Yeah, and I think the point you made before about like come back next year, that is like no doesn't mean no forever. No means not right now. And we have certainly have a list of sponsors, many of whom who said no, but like maybe after we see what happens this year, and maybe we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
We just don't like we'd love to fund this. We just are not in a position for this right now. We'd love to sponsor it next year. So you
Mhm.
you have to like keep going, keep working it.
Yeah.
And if you stick to it, you'll get there.
Yeah, and it's so much about it's also what we were talking about, like creating that the ethos, right? And to me, that part, the ethos part in all of these means the relationship building, the trust, right,
Hmm.
from people. And so if you're meeting them for the first time and are already expecting to get the funding, that's a challenge, right? Because people will they are much more inclined to support you when they have had a prior existing relationship, working
Yep.
relationship the best because they know you and they trust you. But yeah, just any kind. So start building. It's a long-term game. It's a long-term game. So.
Well, thank you so much, Karen. I think this has been really helpful. Hopefully, we'll help more people when they watch the video later. If you're watching the video, thank you. And yeah, we will look forward to speaking to you soon.
Yeah, absolutely. And for anyone that wants mentoring and getting their materials ready for the submission, the short version of the submission or whatever, please let me know. I'm happy to help mentor.
They should you can reach Karen through her LinkedIn, which is linked on the Carbon Removal Challenge website. And yeah, you should take advantage of her kind offer to help with this sort of stuff. Appreciate your time, Karen. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Karen.